situation where you want to do more. Maybe, maybe you are at a place in your career where you are in a more highly visible role. Perhaps you are a leader, maybe you're a director, a manager, a senior VP, perhaps you're a C suite executive, maybe you're a business owner. I want to share with you that there is one mistake. There is one mistake. There's a lot, but there's one main mistake that I want you to avoid making when you are in those very high stakes, high pressure situations. And in this video, I'm going to share with you specifically what categorizes as a high stakes conversation so that we're all on the same page. And I'm going to share with you the number one mistake that people make. I don't want you to make this mistake because if you make this mistake, it will make it very, very hard for you to be able to navigate those challenging situations when you are trying to think on your feet. Maybe you're in a situation where you are in that very highly visible role and every moment counts and the entire room is watching you. So you want to make sure that you're in a good place. And I just don't want you to make this mistake today. Now, if you're new to me, welcome, welcome. And if you're one of my amazing subscribers, welcome back, friend. I'm glad that you are here today. This channel heavily focuses on advanced communication skills and strategies that will help you to be able to communicate more confidently and concisely under pressure. If you happen to be a woman in leadership, you're welcome to reach out to me for an executive strategy session at exciteexcellence.org. Or if you are a man in leadership or someone thinking about leadership and you're not sure just yet, I guarantee you that you will learn some very, very insightful information here on the channel. I want to say hello. Let me see who's in the chat. Hello, Cat. Cat 23rd. Hello, Cat. Good to see you, friend. Thank you for the heart emojis. And Cat 23rd says, "Hey, Doc, heart and 100." Absolutely. Good to see you, Cat. So glad you're here today. Now, we were talking about what's this mistake. So, first, let's define what is considered a high stakes conversation. So, we're all on the same page. Now, a high stakes conversation, what is it? Now, I want to know from you in the comments below, what do you think? What do you think qualifies as a high stakes, high pressure conversation? Let's talk about it. We can compile a list so we're all on the same page. Remember, individuals watch this channel, amazing leaders watch this channel across the world. So it would be amazing for us to develop our own repository of information in terms of what is a high stakes conversation. I'm going to mention a couple of them and I'll let you know what I have so far, but I want to hear from you also. Okay, Cat 23rd says, "I watched the previous video and appreciate the shout out." Of course, Cat, you are so very welcome. I'm glad that you're here and I appreciate you so much for coming up with a very interesting topic as it relates to the paradoxes. So thank you so much. For those of you just joined, welcome, welcome. Let me know if you want to know the one mistake you need to avoid when you are in high stakes conversations. Let me know where you're joining from in the big, beautiful world today. Number one, thank you for the heart emojis, friends. Okay, I am sorry. My live stream just completely stopped in the middle. I don't know what happened there, but now we're back. So I want to say hello to WSP P7D. Hello, hello. Hope you're doing well today. Let me know in the comments below if you can hear me okay. That's the first time I've actually had my YouTube app completely just shut itself down. But the good thing about it is it allowed me to resume the live where I left off. So let me know in the comments below if you can still hear me. I hope that you can and that there's no issues there. So let me know. Just give me a thumbs up, heart emoji, or something along those lines. Hopefully things are okay. Now, let me see. Cat 23 says, "All good. I can hear you." Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Cat. I appreciate you, friend. Thank you so much because I don't know what happened just there, just a moment ago. Now, what qualifies as a high stakes conversation? For those of you watching, let me know, what do you think? What do you think qualifies as a high stakes conversation? I'm going to mention a couple of conversations and let me know if you have some to add to this list. If you are in a salary negotiation, I consider that a high stakes conversation. If you are negotiating a contract or negotiating a business deal or a project, I would definitely consider that high stakes. If you are perhaps in an interview for a job, a position, or whatever the case may be, definitely high stakes. A lot of pressure is involved with that. If you are doing a presentation in front of a group of people, automatically high stakes. Even if it's a small group, or a big group, definitely high stakes. If you are pitching a business idea, definitely high stakes. If you're speaking in front of a group of people, perhaps a board, that's definitely high stakes. If you are speaking in front of your constituents and you're an elected official, that is definitely high stakes. If you are managing a difficult conversation with someone or you are setting boundaries, these are high stakes conversations. So a lot of people think high stakes conversations are for those situations where someone is in front of people, but I'm here to share with you that is a myth that will get you in trouble because high stakes conversations happen every single day in our day-to-day conversations, and a lot of times we don't really think about it. Now in the chat, Kat gave me a high five back. All right, awesome. Chat, Kat, I noticed that you changed your picture. Very, very nice. All right, awesome. So Kat 23 says, communication pitfalls, going in unprepared. Absolutely, Kat. So really good insights that you shared today. Thank you so much for those. Let me know what else. What are some other conversations you all think are high stakes, high pressure conversation? I just listed off several off the top of my head that I have experienced. Let me know what you have experienced, and I'll share you about the one mistake that you don't want to make. Now, let's see. Cat 23 says, new picture, new is refreshing. Absolutely awesome, Cat. Well, that is wonderful. And I appreciate you being here. And I did see your picture, so I wanted to make sure I acknowledge that. Now, what's the mistake that you want to make? The mistake that you don't want to make, I apologize. When you are going into those situations, so we talked about interviews, salary negotiations, presentations to board, communicating with your constituents and etc., having a difficult conversation, setting boundaries with someone, being able to be in a place where you are perhaps making a crisis decision in the moment. Maybe you're on the news interview, maybe you're on a podcast. Some of those can be very high stakes situations. So, what mistake do you want to avoid? The number one mistake, and as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of mistakes that you can make, but this by far, if you take just some time to avoid this one, it will set you apart from everybody else. And that mistake is to not prepare for whatever conversation you have. Now, a lot of times as leaders, we have a lot of things we're dealing with, a lot of challenges, and oftentimes we are in the constant firefighter mode. Now, if you have ever been in a leadership role, let me know if you know exactly what I'm talking about. When I mentioned about firefighters, a lot of times leaders feel like we have to put out fires all the time. I have done that. I feel as if I am a professional firefighter only in the administrative sense, not in actuality, because they have a tremendous job and I commend every one of them for doing that. But you feel like you're in this firefighter mode all the time. And often what happens is when those high stakes moments come up, those under pressure conversations come up, we are sometimes caught off guard. Why? Because we do not have the chance to prepare. So before I go into this topic a bit further, let me see what's going on in the chat. We have JJ9626. Hello, welcome, welcome. Says Jesus is the only way. God bless you. May life reward you with growth and happiness. Well, thank you, JJ9626. Welcome, friend. Glad you're here today. Now, as I mentioned, the number one mistake you want to avoid is not to prepare. You may think, oh, this sounds easy. I know I can prepare. It's not as easy as you think because there's a lot you have to do to prepare. Now, if you are starting out on your leadership journey or you're established, what I tell my clients to do is to avoid this, is to be that person that takes just a few moments. You don't have to take an hour or 2 hours to think about your meeting and what you need to say and how you need to say it and etc. But just take a few moments to plan for the discussion that you're going to have. Majority of times as leaders, I say majority because there's always a minority, but majority of the time as leaders, we have some idea. We know something about the meeting we are walking into. And if you know even just a small amount of information, I know this meeting is going to discuss this project. I know this meeting is going to discuss that project. Take a few moments to think about the project or look up information about it so that when you're in the meeting with your peers and etc., you're able to prepare yourself and communicate what you know about the project. Why is it so important to do this? If you're subscribed to my channel or you follow my content or you're one of my clients, my amazing clients I work with, this is how you become exceptional. Average leaders, average leaders will not prepare. Above average leaders, exceptional leaders that are here will be able to prepare and they will always stand out from everybody else because it looks like they have it together. One of the biggest challenges I see a lot of leaders make, and women in leadership make this mistake sometimes because we're just busy. We have a lot of things that we're dealing with at once. We may have family obligations, we may have work obligations, we may have professional obligations, and it all just comes together and it's a lot. But you want to be that person that appears to have it together. And there's this saying out there, and I know you all probably have heard it. Let me know what your thoughts on it are on this statement specifically. But there's a statement that says, fake it until you make it, right? Fake it until you make it. I don't believe in that, to be honest with you. I don't think you should ever fake anything. If you are at the point where you have to fake it, then we have to go back to the drawing board, especially if you're a client of mine. I do not want my clients to do that because fake it till you make it will get you to the point where one day you will not make it and then everybody will know that you didn't know what you're talking about. So it's very good to be able to establish a very solid knowledge base to begin with, because that is truly, truly how you make it, not by faking it. But a lot of people think that you have to do that, which is the reason why, if you appear to have it together and not necessarily only appear, but you actually do because you spent time preparing in advance, it shows the room you know what you're talking about. How many of you have ever met someone that acts like they know what they're doing, but we all know in reality they don't? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, let me go to the comments. Cat 2030 says high stakes conversations in leadership roles carries additional weight because your words shape culture, trust, and organizational outcomes. Absolutely, Cat. That's a very, 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 very great insight you shared. Beyond general communication pitfalls. Using position to shut down dialogue. Don't let hierarchy prevent bad news from reaching you. Fantastic. Well, Kat, I appreciate you mentioning that. And Kat mentioned some really great insights for those of you watching the live and watching the replay, which is why I try to read those comments out so that the replay audience knows, because they do not have access to the chat. But Kat mentioned some really great points. When you're in those high stakes conversations, especially in leadership roles, it does carry that additional weight. And the reason being is the room is watching you. It's not just you having a conversation, the entire room is watching you. And if you perhaps, let's say you're not in front of the room, maybe you are one on one with someone, that person is watching you too. Think about a salary negotiation. When you are in a salary negotiation, the hiring manager is watching you. They're watching to see what are you going to say, how are you going to say it, how do you negotiate, and etc. So, Kat, I appreciate you so much for bringing that up, because some people think that high stakes conversation, oh, it's nothing to worry about. Or a lot of people will think, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at thinking on my feet. I don't know how people do that. And it becomes this aspiration that people have. And typically when clients are really serious and they're very serious about their growth, especially how they're communicating and they're wanting to really go into that next level, they are past the, I'm not good at that. They're at the point where they are saying to themselves, I want to learn how to master this. How can I become better at this? And this is what I do with my clients every single day, especially with my high stakes communication intensive that I have launched on my website. Okay, so Cat 2030 says inconsistent messaging. Avoid saying one thing to your team and another to executives. It always surfaces and destroys credibility. Cat, thank you, because that is so true. And I know you've been in some leadership roles because of the very wonderful insights that you share. Because when I've seen this happen, somebody in an executive role will say, one thing to their team and another thing to their executives or to their peers. And it, as Kat mentioned, it always comes out in some way. It will come out in the least, I would say, anticipated way. And then your team looks at you as a leader as you don't know what you're talking about. So you definitely don't want to do that also. All right, we have Akitia. Hello, Akitia. Good to see you, friend. We have the King of Greece. Let me see. Akitia says, ladies and gentlemen, the King of Greece has just entered the live straight on board to Paris. Okay, fantastic. Well, Akitia, I hope you have a very, very safe trip to Paris. Let me know how it goes there. We have Hyanur 5908. Hello, Hyanur. And Hyanur says, hello, King of Greece. Absolutely. Well, good to see you all here. Welcome, friends. I'm glad you're here. So, we were just talking about high stakes conversations and what do you think qualifies as a high stakes conversation? We had a lot of things we mentioned already. Let me know in the comments below, Akitia Dekalis and Hyanur, if you have anything you want to add. Kat just added some really great insights to consider as it relates to high stakes conversations. They often carry a lot more weight. You want to make sure that you are not in a position where you're letting bad news not reach you, and then also making sure your messages are very, very consistent. So let me know, what else do you think qualifies as a high stake conversation? And the mistake that I mentioned that you want to avoid making in those very high stakes, high pressure conversations, whether you are in a salary negotiation or you're having a difficult conversation or etc. What do you think? What do you think? The mistake that I shared is to not prepare. Preparing is something that you absolutely want to do. And one of the best ways for you to prepare as a leader, this is the actionable item you can do starting today, is to take a few moments, think about the meeting you're going to, and think about it to the point where you prepare just few minutes for this conversation. It will set you up to be the person that appears as if you have it together, you know exactly what's going on. That is how you stand out as a leader. Okay. Cat 2030 says, question, Cat, you know you can always ask me a question, friend. Go right ahead. Akitia Decala says, hi, says 2 minutes of silence, please. Okay, Akitia says, hi. Akitia says, Dr. Hi, miss you. What's the topic? Okay, Akitia, and thank you for the heart emojis, friends. We are talking about the number one mistake to avoid in high stakes conversations. We talked about what are high stakes conversations. So I listed off a list of conversations that I would consider to be high stakes conversations, which, and Akisi, I know you have some knowledge too in terms of being a leader. So if you have anything you want to share, let me know. But we went over a couple of examples of high stakes conversations, and I mentioned to you specifically the mistake that people make going into high stakes conversations is they do not prepare in advance. They don't take that time to just pause for a moment and think about, what is this conversation or what is this meeting that I'm going into about, and what is the one piece of insight that I can share to add value or to bring depth to the conversation. People usually don't do that, especially as leaders, because we're so busy, we're putting out fires, we just don't have time. And it's so important for us to be able to pause for just a moment to make sure we're doing that. Cat 2030 says, how do you calibrate your emotional investment, caring enough to be compelling, but not so much that you can't adapt? Cat, that's a really great question. So, a lot of that emotional, I would say, calibration, it comes down to preparing. And we talk about this a lot on the channel as well. And there's always that balance. You don't want to be that person that cares too much, but you don't want to be the person that can't adapt to change either, if that makes sense. A lot of it comes down to, how do you manage? Well, first, let me say this. Let me go back. Instead of how do you manage stress, where do you see yourself within the next year, 2 years, 5 years? Kat, I know specifically you're in college right now. Where do you see yourself in terms of where do you want to go? Why do I say that? I have found when I was starting out in my career many, many years ago, before I became a doctor and all of that, I found that if I put where I want to be at the forefront of my mind, I decided that maybe some of the positions or roles or interactions I had may not be something that I need to focus a lot of my energy on, because I had this big vision in front of me that I wanted to do outside of what I was dealing with. That actually helped me to be able to modify how I manage my emotions in those situations. I am concerned, of course, about something that's going on, but I try not to get too emotional about it or care or show that I care too much about it, unless strategically I feel like I need to, which there's times when you want to do that. But it comes down to what's the big vision for you. And when you notice, let's say, for instance, you want to, let's say, for example, for Akesia. Okay, so let's say Akesia is the king of Greece, right? So if Akesia is the king of Greece, then he may be having a conversation with some about his business or the role he's in right now. And he may care about it because he's in that role. But if he's the king of Greece, he has bigger aspirations that he's trying to do. Right. And so it gets to the point where some of those things, even though they are important, but they're not that important as it relates to you and your role. This is a great way to manage your emotions because if you know you have something bigger going on, right? You have this big world you're trying to plan, and you know your present moment, you need to be involved, but you don't want to be too overly emotional. If you keep that vision in mind, then you'll realize that maybe some of the conversations or issues you're dealing with, they're maybe just not that important. Maybe it's just not that important. I don't need to worry about it too much. Okay, and question number two for Kat says, oh, and you still wanna function in your role too. You still wanna function in your role. I mean, I saw your second part of it. You still wanna function, you still wanna adapt, but there comes to a point where you have to care, but not care as much because you have something bigger you're trying to do with your life. All right. Kat says, question number two. How do you handle high stakes dialogue with someone who has more organizational power than you do? Okay, Kat, that's a really good question. Hi, Nora, and Kat's got another question too. Okay, so this is a really great question. And actually, Kat, I like this one. I like all of your questions and your insights as well, along with Akitia's and Hyanur's. I took a screenshot because I believe we can dive a bit more into that topic, but let me give you just some very much like 10,000-foot view type of things to do. When you're in that situation where someone has more organizational power, specifically, this person has a higher position than you. Maybe they're the CEO, maybe they're the C-suite, maybe they're in some leadership role. It doesn't matter. They're in a higher level than you are on paper. One of the things that can help you handle high stakes dialogue with those people, those individuals, is to master those very three aspects of communication that I mentioned to you all that people struggle with constantly. Why? Because even though, Kat, there may be someone that is at a organizational level higher than you, that does not mean that they are skilled communicators under pressure like you are by subscribing to this channel. Most people struggle with eye contact, facial expressions, and silence. When you're having that high stakes conversation with someone that has more organizational power than you, those three have to be present. Why? Because it showcases that you can communicate in those very under pressure, high stakes situations, even though you may not necessarily be at that organizational level as that person. And then, two, it establishes your own executive presence. And that is the way to handle those high stakes conversations. Make sure that you take some time to master those three aspects because those three aspects, I'm telling you, I have been doing this for over 20 years. I have been in some really very contentious conversations. And if I did not have those three and know when I need to use them specifically, I would not be where I am today. And I definitely would not have been able to negotiate and navigate some of the very challenging situations I've had as a leader. So I would start with those three. Make sure that when you're talking to leaders, you're showing them that I am at leader level and I'm probably actually a little bit beyond leader level. That is how you manage some of those high stakes situations. Another aspect of it is, and this happens a lot too, Kat. People will sometimes get in a situation where they become very intimidated when they are meeting with somebody. Why? Because they're meeting someone that has a higher organizational level than they do. And by default, some people say, oh, I'm meeting with this person, that person. And so they automatically turn their confidence down because they feel like they can't be as confident as they want to be because they're talking to somebody that maybe have has a higher level in terms of leadership or their role than they do. I want you to be at a place, and I mean this in all sincerity. And if you ever need help, you're always willing to reach out to me. But this is what I do with my clients all the time. I want you to be at a place where your confidence is so big, it doesn't matter if you are talking to the president of a country. It doesn't matter if you are talking to a leader in your organization. It doesn't matter. It does not matter who you're talking to. Your confidence is always on the ready and it's up here. Now, you may be thinking, there's no way possible that can happen. Yes, it can. That's why we work together. So I can help you develop that confidence. But this is what you can do when you're in those situations, in those high stakes situations, those three aspects of communication. Your confidence has to be unusually high confidence, and that will help you to meet that person wherever they are, even if they're at that higher level than you are. I hope that gives you something to think about, Kat. There's a lot more we can dive into that, and I probably will in another video for sure. Hi, Nora says, my 2 minutes is over. Cat 23rd says, in the next years down the line, I want to be like you, Doc. Oh, well, that's sweet, Cat. I appreciate that. Share the knowledge you taught me, and I can pass it down to others. Well, absolutely, Cat. I appreciate that. And absolutely. Kat, you are your own unique individual. You have your own gifts and talents as well. So you always want to use those. And of course, anything that you learn, you're welcome to share. I know many of us may not be able to meet us physically, but we will actually. So there's a conversation we had a couple last week actually. So what I'm planning to do before I finish reading the chats, what I'm planning to do hopefully this year is actually set up a Zoom meeting for us. I'm going to host it in different time zones on different days because I know many of you like Akitsia and then also Hidden Human TV, Dekuma, they're all in different time zones. And I do plan on doing something where we can meet together via Zoom, have a conversation, and just have a chat because I interact with you all so much. I'm here with you all the time, and I see you. We communicate via chat. But of course, would be so happy to see you in real life as well. So that's coming up at some point real soon, and we'll have some type of theme around that. Hi, Nora says, question. Basically, they don't have more on paper, but they are well known and just loved around the world. Would it affect the conversation? It shouldn't affect the conversation. I think when those situations, when you have someone that is, as you mentioned, they don't necessarily have more on paper, but they're loved around the world or the room or whatever the case may be, it should your conversation should still be the same. You may want to be congratulatory of that person. Congratulations on the many successes you have accomplished in your career, in your role, in your position, the case may be. But you still have to show those three aspects of communication. And you also want to be able to be very, very confident. I have interacted with elected officials throughout my life, and I've interacted with the Senate Majority Leader many, 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 many years ago when I was in an externship. Now, for those of you who do not know about how succession goes in the United States, if something happens to the president, it goes to the vice president. If something happens to the vice president, it goes down to the speaker and it goes down forward. So I've been in those interactions and I've still maintained myself to be confident regardless of who I'm interacting with. So it doesn't change the conversation, Hayanor. It just it shouldn't. That's why I want you all to develop that the highest, and I mean this in all sincerity. And if you think you can't have it, then you just have to stick around with me or work with me directly. But I want you all to develop the highest level of confidence because that will allow you to manage those high stakes situations, those under pressure situations when they happen. So you're not caught off guard. You're able to articulate yourself well. You're able to defend yourself if you need to, but you're also able to lead others to do and persuade them or to help them create a big movement depending on what you're trying to do in the world. Pankaj saying, hello, Pankaj. Good to see you, friend. Welcome, welcome. Pankaj says, "Good morning. Good to see you." Hayanur says, "Good morning, Pankaj." And Akitsia says, "Doctor, in case of high stakes situation with you, let's say you are my manager, I could start saying, 'Why are you so beautiful?' Joking." Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Akitsia. That I appreciate that. Some humor there, as always with you. So it's good to have. Aketia says, "My official comment is coming below." Okay. Okay. Pankaj says, "Good morning. Hi, Noor. Nice name, by the way." And Hi, Noor says, "Thank you." Okay. So we talked about high stakes situations. Whenever they come up, we had a list of high stakes situations. If you all think of any conversations you can think that would be under pressure, really challenging to have, put them in the comments below. Let's talk about them so at least everybody has access to that. And then the major mistake, the one mistake I want you all to avoid is not preparing for your conversations, your meetings, your discussions, and etc. If you take just a few moments to at least prepare for the conversation, it will set you apart from everybody else. If it is a conversation and you know this meeting is going to be a bit more involved than just you memorizing or reflecting on one or two talking points, then take that time to prepare for that meeting. You will always stand out from everybody else if you take the time to prepare. Now, there's one part of it preparing for the meeting, but what happens when the meeting goes into pressure? That's the other part you have to prepare for. So you have to prepare for that emotional investment, as Kat talked about. You have to prepare exactly how are you going to articulate yourself when someone challenges you or there is a topic that you don't necessarily agree with. There's so many aspects of preparation that I want you all to do, and I'm going to have a couple of those in the free ebook I mentioned to you all that I'm developing right now. I'm actually going to be adding a bonus to the ebook, so that's why it's taking a little bit longer. But this is something that it's just a part of life. The more organized you are, the more that you plan ahead and you plan as best as you can. There's always things happen in life that will throw you off guard and you're just not sure. I didn't know how to plan for that. I've experienced a lot of those, especially last year and this year, but more last year. But it happens, life happens. And I'm just here to tell you that if you just try to prepare, and those of you watching or subscribe to my channel or you've watched my content, hang out with me, spend some time with me here, especially on my lives. I will help you learn how to start preparing for those high stakes conversations so you are the person that can advocate for yourself when everybody else wants to stay quiet. You want to be that kind of leader. Okay, let's see. Cat 2030 says, "Personal question. What are you still figuring out about high stakes leadership conversations?" Well, there's a lot. I would say that's a really great question. So, one of the things that I would say in terms of what I am still developing or still figuring out would be how high stakes conversations can really make a big impact in terms of the worldview. So, there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. And we've talked a lot about the war that's going on right now, the wars that's going on right now, and etc. And so for me, this has been a very, very good observation for myself to see how leaders are communicating as it relates to those very high stakes, high pressure situations. These are situations where people's lives are on the line, people are dying, and it's sad. And so that's something I have been able to just pay a bit more attention to and just determine, well, when you see leaders communicate in this way, this is in actuality what could potentially be going on, or what message are they sharing with others. When it comes to those very highly visible, highly public roles where you may be an elected official or you may be a C-suite or you may be an owner of a business, there's there's as much information as you can share, but the one thing that you all have to figure out, I guess I could share with you, Kat, because I've been on the back end of conversations with different congressmen, congresswomen, etc. There is there is some things that are told to you in person, right? Verbally. Okay. Verbally. I'm telling this is my message, this is what I'm telling everybody. But there are conversations that happen behind closed doors that will say the exact opposite. Now, I know it sounds a bit baffling, like, "What?" But I'm telling you, this is what happens in the world of politics and global leaders and things like that. They will have conversations behind closed doors, but publicly they say something completely different. And so that is something I've always been working on and trying to figure out, because that in itself can make it very challenging when you're trying to communicate a message to a group of people, because you want to be transparent and let people know what's going on. But then there's always aspects of conversations in those high stakes situations that you may not be able to share everything. And sometimes that happens in leadership too. You may not have all the information yet, and you may say, I can't tell everything because I don't know everything. And you have to find that balance of, well, what can I share to show that I'm being as transparent and as candid as I can be, but what are some things I may have to withhold sharing for the time being because I need more information on. So that's something I'm always constantly trying to figure out. Okay, so Akitia says, one case, if you were my manager and my objective was to win and upgrade, I was going firstly to present the successful way I support the objective of the company and my personal objective. That's a really good insight. So that is a way to balance the two, because you are trying to present yourself in that successful way where you are being very supportive of the company. And so there's always a balance there. And so Akiti, I appreciate you so much for bringing that up, because it's one of those things you have to just keep in mind. You When you're working for a company and you're trying to do your own thing, or you have your own vision like the king of Greece, there's a lot of things that you think about, and you have to balance things out too. Cat 23 says, when you're unprepared in high stakes conversation, several predictable failure patterns emerge. Yes, and you can actually study this by listening to people in conversations all the time. I was just talking to a client about this, or sharing her some insight. When you're trying to prepare for those unpredictable conversations, take a look at different interviews of people, and you will see sometimes when the conversation may go into the wrong direction. You'll see the person start to stumble, or they may say, okay, no more questions. It can be somewhat predictable when the conversation has not been truly prepared for in advance. Akitia says, firstly, the good of the company and then mine. Yes. And so there's that balance we all play, Akitia, as you know very well. Y- It's like, well, I would say, let me not say it's like, I would say your interest just should still be at the forefront, because companies will replace you in a heartbeat. I'll tell you that right now. They will, unfortunately. But so always put yourself first and the company second, but you can manage it in a way to where you still, almost like Kat was mentioning earlier, where you still appear emotionally invested, but you're not at the point where you're just giving it all. You have to make a balance there so that you are still being that very productive employee if that's the route you're taking, but you still have to take care of yourself too. And that's where setting some of those boundaries can help also. Cat 23 says immediate reactions. Yes, I think you were talking about what I was mentioning earlier. Cat Cat also says cognitive narrowing. Your brain defaults to threat response. Thank you for the heart emojis. You miss nuance, nonverbals, and opportunities. Cat, very, very, very good insight. Thank you for the heart emojis. And I mentioned this on a video, and I believe it might have been within the last week. When you have those situations come up and you're just simply not prepared for it, it's almost as if your mind is on overload. And when you're in those situations, you just freeze. I just had a conversation with someone this past week, and they were in a situation where they have been in this senior VP role for a long time. And what happened in this role is that there are conversations they have in a group setting, and there's always a few people that somewhat think they know what she's doing, and they somewhat try to, I wouldn't say discredit her, but they try to make it say like, oh, we already know what you're doing, just let's keep going. And she talked to me about it, and she said she just freezes. She doesn't know what to say, and she just stays quiet. And sometimes this will happen because your mind is encountering a threat, as Kat said. So there's a threat coming, someone's dismissing you or being dismissive of you, or they're not quite sure exactly what you don't know what their intentions are. You're trying to process their what are they trying to say. Thank you for the heart emojis. You're trying to think of what are you going to say. Should you say something right now? Should you wait for a few minutes? What is everybody gonna say? Are people looking at me? And the brain just goes, okay, I'm done. Turn the switch off. I'm done. I'm finished. And that's where what Kat was mentioning, it truly does happen. And that is how people are caught off guard and they don't say anything in the moment. But there are ways for you to be able to manage that. You have to pay attention and be very observant of people and how they're communicating with you. That's one part. But then the actual saying of it and speaking up for yourself, that's where people really, really, really start to struggle with because even though they may have it here in their mind and they may work with me or they may have a conversation or they may look at videos, there comes a point where you have to work with someone one on one so they can work with you and say, I noticed that you are pausing here. Why is that? What are you afraid of? What are you saying? And in my high stakes communication intensive, I actually do drills, high stakes drills, where we have conversations about different situations that could come up that might be a bit more challenging for you so that I can see how do you react and help you not to react that way or change how you are reacting based on what we discussed. So this is something that is not out there especially for my target audience, but I'm here to really help y'all, which is why this is the reason why I'm here to support you, to help you be able to communicate in those hard situations because sometimes you just have to go through it. Okay, so Kat also said you hear selectively often only the parts that confirm your anxiety. That's true, Kat. Very good insights you're sharing because it's so true. There's something that happens in your mind when there is a threat, there's a challenge, either your brain has been trained to say, okay, wait, 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 hold on, let me listen to what's being said and let me respond accordingly. Or your brain says, no, I'm not ready. And a lot of times you just have to be trained. It's like any other muscle or anything you're trying to do. Make sure you are training yourself and subscribing to the channel is a great way to train yourself. But ultimately, if you're trying to get that customized, that direct one on one support, definitely want to reach out to me so we can work together. Akesia says, exactly, doctor. We have to act like actors and putting firstly the good of the company. Right, exactly, Akesia. 100% correct, friend. Something irrelevant. Here in Greece, we are laughing with Trump when he says Iran desperately wants an agreement. Haha. Yeah, I think all of us, Akesia, are laughing at that, to be honest with you. We all know that there's something that it just doesn't something's just not coming together. Like it's just something's not coming together. And I think the entire world sees that there is a disconnect there for sure. Cat 23rd says emotional leakage, anxiety manifests as appeasement. Good call, Cat. Absolutely. Okay, let me read that again. Emotional leakage, anxiety manifests as appeasement, agreeing to things you shouldn't or failing to advocate for your interests. Another thing, Cat, which has a great insight, I'm going to add to that. That anxiety piece will definitely lead into appeasement. And one of the most common signs that people do to show appeasement even though they're anxious and even though they don't know if they disagree, is they will nod their heads. They will just go into just bobblehead mode and they will just nod their heads. Okay, okay, okay. Even though they know what is being said is perhaps not benefiting them, but because the anxiety is there, they feel like they have to be able to be in a situation where they completely agree, which is one of the reasons why it's so important to control your body language. Many times when people in those hard situations, and let me know if it's ever happened to you, it's happened to me many years ago. It happens to the best of us. But if you are subconsciously you're telling this person, yes, yes, I agree with you, even though you're in your mind, you're thinking no, but it's your brain's way of saying this is the least path of resistance. Just nod your head. Just nod your head and say, okay, 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 I understand. But the other part of your brain, if it's been trained to not do this, to not move your head, is something that will be able to kick in. So when you have those situations come up, and you feel maybe a bit of anxiety, or you might feel a bit concerned about what's being said, you know your mind has basically been trained to say, okay, wait, hold on. We have to control our body language. We have to control our body language. I need you to know what type of face you have on. And I would like for you also to control your facial expressions. And it's something you have to be in those very high stakes situations. That's why I use drills with my clients to get your mind prepared mentally so that when those situations come up, you're a bit more stoic in nature instead of being the person that agrees. Or, as Kat mentioned, you just are appeasing them because you're feeling a bit anxious. Sometimes you will feel a little anxious, but you have to feel it and move past it and keep going. It's the same thing people talk about when you're jumping into entrepreneurship. You feel the fear and you move through it anyways. It's the same kind of process to help you in those high stakes situations. And I will share with you one other thing too before we finish up. It just takes one or two times for you to speak up for yourself, for you to start to build that muscle and say, oh, I can do this. Think about it. When you're going to the gym and you're exercising, how many reps do you have to do to get comfortable? A lot. But there is something very, very powerful that happens when you advocate for yourself or you feel confident about yourself and you know you can handle this challenging situation. You just it takes a couple of times. Now, of course, it takes more practice to perfect it and master it, but doing it at least once or twice, you start to build up that confidence muscle that you may not have ever built before. And your mind, your brain, your body, your expressions will never forget that feeling. And you will always feel as if, oh, I can do this. I can disagree. I can manage the situation. It's definitely something that will change your life for sure, which is why I'm here. Akesia says, let's see. Sports and leisure stand for optimism, and optimism helps at work, especially in stressful business environment. Doctor, do you do any sports, any activity outside your work? Great question. So I don't do any sports right now. I did sports when I was in high school. Thank you for the heart emojis. I did a track and field. I did a couple things there, the bigger things like shot put and discus, that's what I did. But I don't do a lot of sports, not right now. I definitely don't. I have a couple things I'm working on right now. But outside of work, I'm really heavily focused on the business and being able to provide you all with support. Many of you know that one of the things I do like actually that I would say Akiti, if I had anything outside of work, that I do like, I like supercars. So many of you know I like supercars. I talk about supercars on my channel. So that would be my activity. If I'm not working in the middle of work, working on the business, working with my clients, providing them with value and helping them, I'm probably watching something about a supercar more than likely. That's probably what I'm doing on my off time. Okay, Cat 23 says, it has happened to me too. It's like the mind and body are not in the same place. Yes, it does. And it's one of those situations where you just have to be trained. One, having someone tell you, by the way, I noticed that you nod your head quite a bit in agreement. Let's try to stop doing that. Let's try to see if you can maybe not nod your head just for a few moments in a conversation. So it's one of those things you have to just train yourself to say, no, I can't do this. No, I can't do that. But that's why you work with me, so I can help you do that. Okay, and Kat also says, I played basketball last year, but school had me on a chokehold, so I had to leave sports for a while. That's awesome. Very cool. I have played basketball a long, 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 long time ago, but I completely understand about school because you are very, 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 very busy. Now, that's a good point, and I appreciate you mentioning that, Kat. Akesia, you know you're going to have to tell us what do you do in your activity free time. We've already have basketball from Kat. Cat plays sports, plays basketball. I don't play sports right now, but I will watch something on supercars all day because I like supercars. But let's see what you like to do. Akesia says, before a high stakes issue, watch Best of Trumps, enjoy, and then go to your manager. Right. Yeah. Well, as I mentioned before, the situation right now, it truly is it is a master class of how you communicate well, how you do not communicate well, what are some things you can change. And as soon as I get my studio set up and I get my monitor set up, I will definitely do some reaction videos, hopefully sooner rather than later, because I believe that it will share with you some insights in terms of how to really think about how leaders communicate and pick up, oh, they do this really well or they do this really poorly. Let me make sure I don't do that. Okay, we have Teddy Mitchell, 8508. Hello, Teddy. How you doing today? Says Pure Honey, how you doing? I'm doing well, Teddy. Welcome, welcome to the channel. Cat 23 says, but I'm a photographer too. Oh, well, that's great, Cat. Take pictures while taking walks. It's amazing. That's fantastic. Are you monetizing your pictures right now, Cat? I know a lot of people do that, especially on trying to think of the sites. There's a couple other sites out there right now where people take pictures and they post them and then they get royalties off of them. So I wasn't sure if that's something that you have done. I would assume that if you're doing a lot of nature walks and taking pictures that you have probably some really nice pictures that people would want to potentially purchase. Aketia says basketball and swimming, my sports cat. Okay, fantastic. Cat, what position in basketball fit you best? Okay, awesome. So we'll wait for Cat to respond. Okay, Teddy Mitchell, 8508 says, just passing through. Keep smiling and loving you. Keep living your best life. Well, thank you, Teddy. Appreciate you being here and glad you stopped by the channel today. So we talked about high stakes communication or high stakes conversations. We listed off a couple of those conversations and we talked about the number one mistake you want to avoid doing if you're going into a high stakes conversation, which is to not prepare. If you do not prepare, you will not be successful. And it's not only just preparing for the meeting, you do want to take a few moments to prepare for that meeting, whatever it is, but you also want to make sure you're preparing the rest of you. How you're speaking, your eye contact, your body language, your facial expressions, how you're managing your emotions under pressure. How do you respond back to someone when they challenge you? All those things we talk about here on the channel. But if you need some support specifically for you, reach out to me. Okay, Cat 23 says nature, urban, and graffiti wall pictures. Okay, great. So, as I mentioned, there's different sites that are out there that purchase pictures if that's something that you want to do. And if you're trying to think of ways to add additional revenue or income to your household, it's just something I see a lot of people do quite a bit. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that also. Well, I appreciate you all being here today. Let me know what are some topics that you want to learn more about in the upcoming lives. I have a couple things I'm planning for this upcoming week, but I really want to focus on what specifically you all want to learn a little bit more as it relates to those very challenging conversations, because I want you to be very confident and do your delivery and be able to navigate those situations as best as you can. There's only but so much we can do in a group setting here on YouTube. So I'm trying to share as much as I can what I've learned over the past 20 years, because a lot of things I have not been in a situation where someone said, "Okay, let's sit down and let's talk about how do you manage this situation." I had to learn and I had to make a lot of mistakes along the way, and I want you all to avoid those mistakes also. Cat 23 says, at Akitia DeCalis, I was playing point guard. Awesome. Very good. Kat says, do you mind waiting a sec while I check? Because I wrote the topics down. Sure, Kat, we'll go ahead and wait for you for just a second. Absolutely. So I mentioned to you about some type of meeting we're gonna have at some point in time. I'll do it in different at different times so I can accommodate different time zones for everybody in terms of what works best for them, and we'll do some type of meeting here very soon. I would say it'll probably be before the end of the year as the channel grows. We're at about 842 subscribers last time I checked. So that will get to 1,000 pretty quickly. And once you reach 1,000, it does there's things that change for sure. So I appreciate you being here. We'll definitely do something where we can see each other at some point in time. I do have a free ebook that's going to come out on high stakes conversations. It'll definitely be something you want to just download. I will let you know as soon as that is available. I'm going to try to do a couple of community spotlights here on my channel. It comes up on YouTube where it talks about different people that interact with your channel. So I want to make sure that I am doing a bit more on there. You can also make comments on the community tab in my channel now. My channel has reached that level where my community can make comments or make posts as well. So just make sure that if you make a post, of course, it's something that is related to challenging situations and subjects and things like that. That is appropriate. And what else I want to say? Let me see. Let me see what's going on in the chat first. Okay. So Akeisha says, Doctor, a question is coming below. And Teddy Mitchell says, diamonds and hearts and honey. Don't start with how was your weekend or how was the weather. Oh, right. You've seen those commercials, the advertisements they have on YouTube where the people are just so serious, like, don't start with how your weekend was or how was the weather. Okay, well, you don't have to, but there's a balance. People tend to think you can't learn everything from AI. AI can teach you a lot, and I think a lot of those picked up that. Thank you for the heart emojis. But many times, and have you all seen that the videos? It comes up on YouTube sometimes if you don't have the premium plan, or even if you're just looking around on other apps or other platforms, they'll have don't say this, say this. And some of that can be very helpful. But the one that Teddy mentioned about don't start with how was the weekend or how was the weather, if that's the way you want to communicate, then that's fine. Those people say that all the time. But for me, I believe that if you are talking to someone, you have to build a certain amount of rapport and charisma with that person. If you come at somebody and say, for example, Teddy, I'm going to mention you specifically because you mentioned that, and it is very funny. And I like the funny face you have on there. If I said, Teddy Mitchell, what's going on? Welcome to the channel. Glad you're here. Okay. If I first met you and you said, "Okay, well, all right. Well, hello. How are you?" If you say, "How is everything going? How was your weekend?" It makes it feel like a conversation, not like you're talking to a robot. And a lot of times I believe the reason why people struggle with those very high stakes conversations or even building rapport and becoming that leader that can inspire and influence others is they think that they have to communicate like a robot, and you don't. You do want to be articulate, you do want to be polished, that's for sure, but you don't necessarily have to communicate like the people like Teddy mentioned on there with those ads that talk about don't say this, don't say that. It's very, very odd. But I appreciate you bringing that up, Teddy. Okay, Cat 23 says team and culture. Okay, we can talk about that. Relationships and influence. We can absolutely talk about that. Okay, so let me take a couple screenshots, Kat. So I'll have those and come up with some topics for you around that. Aketia says, did you have any unsuccessful high stakes conversations? If so, what was the cost and how did you set it up? Yes, I will talk about that in just a quick second. Kat says self and presence. We can talk about that. Tell me specifically about self exactly. Okay, Teddy Mitchell says, has some smiley faces and laughs, and Kat says, what's going on exactly? Okay, and let me see what Aketia says. Aketia says, in case of high stakes conversation, we trump, you better know self defense. Right. Aketia says, haha, and Kat says, last one, ethics and legacy. Okay, great. So I would say, Kat, tell me a little bit about self. There's a lot of things I can cover with self. Some of the other ones I know I can cover pretty quickly. Now, Akesia, I had one high stakes conversation, and this was unsuccessful. And I've talked about this on my channel. I had a conversation a long time ago now. Very, 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 very long time ago now. And the conversation, it was a meeting I was having, and I actually talked about this in a video, but it was a meeting I was having specifically with someone about a performance issue. And this issue, I prepared, but I didn't fully prepare like I should have. I didn't really know the person that well because I was relatively new in the role, but I just came at the conversation as there's something that was done incorrectly. What happened? And I wasn't as, I would say, as maybe warm as I should have been in that conversation. Well, the conversation didn't go as well as I thought that it was going to go. Thank you for the heart emojis. So what happened in my case, Akesia, is that the person They did do something wrong. They did do something really actually critically wrong that could endanger someone's life, and I had to talk about it. It's not like I can just say, "Oh, that's okay. I hope that person doesn't die." I can't do that. I have to tell you that, "Okay, there's an issue, there's a problem. What happened here? Why did you not do this? This is serious." And the person became very, very argumentative, very combative, and very, 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 very disturbed. And all of this happened because they were mad and they felt like, oh no, I shouldn't have said anything to them about that. I had the meeting at the end of the day, which I talked to you all about why I don't do meetings at the end of the day. I had the meeting in a closed door space. Should not have done that. And then I had the meeting in a way to where I couldn't leave the room because the conversation became very, very contentious to the point where I felt threatened, contentious. And moving forward in those situations, when when I have meetings now, or I did as when I was in a C-suite role or as a director, I purposely am a bit more strategic about having those conversations because it ended up turning into a big issue, a big issue. The person got mad. They were really upset, and it just went on and on and on and on and on and on. It ended up working out well for me because the person ended up not being with the organization anymore. But ultimately, that was a very hard conversation, it's a very high stakes conversation, and it did not go well. It did not go well. I felt threatened. The person I was with felt threatened because it was me and another person. We felt very threatened by the person because they just completely just I mean, they switched gears in a matter of seconds. They went from smiling to frowning to mad to anger. It just was very uncomfortable, Akesia. So I've been in those situations. And what was the cost? The cost, believe it or not, the cost was actually, I would say, beneficial for me because this particular person, people had always somewhat walked around on eggshells, so to speak, as we say, and I was not that kind of person. If there was a problem, I'm going to address it, and most people would not because this individual specifically gave off a very, very just aggressive vibe, and everybody just said, "Mm, I don't want to deal with this person. I don't want to deal with this person at all." And for me, it actually showed that I am a leader. I will handle issues. I'm not going to walk on eggshells with anybody, and I will have those difficult conversations if I need to. And that was a very defining moment for me, even though I had a lot of backlash back and forth because people didn't understand. Well, why can't you let them do this? Why can't you let them do that? But it showcased me as a leader to where I could let them know, by the way, I can handle these hard situations. I can actually take care of it versus be that person that just sweeps it under the rug. And the problem was is that this individual, they've been sweeping under the rug for a while and letting them do whatever they want to do. So it didn't go well in the moment, but at the end, in terms of when everything settled down, people looked at me a little bit differently because they knew I was there to handle business and I wasn't going to just back down because someone said they didn't like something that they were really upset. Okay, so let me see what's in the chat. Okay, let's see. I think I took ethics and legacy from you, Kat. I saw that. Let's see, and personal resilience and recovery patterns. Okay, so I'll come up with a couple things, and if there's anything specific, just let me know. But I'll took a couple screenshots for you, Kat, and we'll have some conversations about that, and I'll give you a shout out. Teddy says, did your hoodie come out?" No, I don't have that, but no, it did not. I mean, when you have people that are when you're at that level, especially when you are a C-suite executive, a business owner, a leader, you can still set someone straight and then let them know, hey, this is something that this is not working. But you don't have to be that person that's like, you better not talk to me like that. You don't need to do all that. Why? Because it it takes you down as an executive. And if you're subscribed to the channel, you're watching my content, regardless of whatever happens, I still am going to communicate with myself and with my team, with my audience in the most professional way. We have people, Teddy, that come on here and say the most offensive, rude stuff, racist things, all kinds of stuff. And I communicate with them the same way. I have that conversation, completely shut it down, hide them from the channel, and I still keep going and I still communicate with them that exact way. So sometimes people will say, yeah, you can let that side out, right? You can let that side out when people try to threaten you. But there's just a balance. You have to project yourself as the person, as we kind of talked about before, that can handle those very hard pressure situations, because if you can't, and if you react in a very highly emotional way and let that part come out, then people say, oh, they didn't know exactly what they were doing, or I knew they were going to be like that. And sometimes that can actually make the situation a lot more challenging what it needs to be, because the emotions start to come in. And when the emotions start to come in, it makes the conversation a bit messy. Messy for the person giving the conversation or delivering the bad news, and messy for the person that's receiving it. People get emotional, they get upset, people regret what they say. And I don't like to live life with regrets. I like to communicate in a professional way, but in a way that is very, very direct when I need to be. And most of you know me here, and you know how I've communicated with people that come onto the channel that are trolls. So Teddy, that's a good point, but there's always ways to go around it and handle it in a different way. Lakan Fatigba, hello, welcome, welcome. Welcome from Nigeria. Akesia says, very interesting case study, doctor. For sure. Yes, and there are certain aspects of this specific situation I can't actually talk about in like verbally for legal reasons, because it was, like I said, it was a very challenging situation, but it still worked out to my advantage. It still definitely helped me out tremendously. But that's what happened. There's a video that I learned that I did specifically. I can't remember the name of it because we have over 1,000 videos on this channel. There's not a lot of channels that have over 1,000 videos. I have a lot of content here. And there's a video I have specifically that talks about the lessons I learned from that specific situation. I may go do another video at that at some point, because I learned a lot from that conversation about when to have hard conversations, how to prepare for them, why you need to know where your exits are, all those things that people may sit there and say, that's a bit excessive. You need to know where your exits are. You need to let people know you're having a hard conversation. Yes, until you've been in a highly contentious conversation with someone where you felt threatened, your perception of reality is somewhat different than someone that's actually been in it, which is the reason why I don't want any of you to be set up in a situation where it may be more challenging and you're struggling and you don't know what to do. I hope that you remember that I mentioned to you, you need to have these things in place if you know you're going to have a hard conversation with somebody. Okay, Cat 23 says appreciate it, and 100. Cat says true, because impulsive behavior can lead to your downfall, even though it's not your fault in some occasions, just your actions alone let let your demise. Yes, or lead to your demise. Yes, exactly. And that's the challenge. That's why managing your emotions. Sorry, I hit my ring here. That's why managing your emotions under pressure is so incredibly important. Because if you can't manage your emotions, what do we say here? Kat and Akesia know this all the time. You have to know your triggers. You have to know your triggers. There's going to be some words, there's going to be some statements, there's going to be some facial expressions that are going to trigger you. And if you know what these triggers are. And that's why you work with me as executive coach, so we can help find those triggers and figure out what they are. You can start to develop a response or a templated response to those triggers when they come up, so that when you see them happen, you know immediately, I need to shift gears in this conversation. We need to go in a different direction. I've had conversations where people come in and talk to me, and I see them grabbing the chair, like they're just like they're nervous grabbing the chair. They may be nervous, but I still take that seriously. I still have to pay attention to that. And sometimes you can respond emotionally and say, what's going on with this person? You just don't want to do that. You want to be the person that is obviously very empathetic to people and what they have going on, but what you control with your facial expressions will dictate a lot of the conversation. And if you are in a situation where you feel like this conversation, or feel as if this conversation is going in an odd direction, or maybe you don't like the direction it goes, your facial expressions can either lighten the mood or they can make it more serious, to where you're telling the person, okay, I don't like this direction that this is going. We need to change it pretty quickly. Okay, so Teddy says, so when you cool down, was there a one-on-one conversation? So I actually didn't get upset. So I just intuitively for me, I'm not the person to get angry about things. Like I just don't. That's just me. But when you're in a leadership role, you have to really work on that. You have to work on what makes you upset. But I didn't get upset at this person. We still had a conversation the same way I'm talking to you now. It's just that this person took their side of the conversation. So let's say if we were communicating, Teddy, not you and I, but me and this person. If we were here communicating, right? We're talking, 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 talking. This person went here. I stayed here. I did not go up to where this person was because then we would keep going up and up and up. And I don't do that. I'm not going to banter back and forth with someone, especially if I'm the leader of the department. And I stayed neutral. I stayed very calm in what I was saying, but the person was got upset. So there wasn't really a lot of a conversation that happened outside of that because, as I mentioned, there's some things legally I can't talk about. But ultimately, you just have to. I know it's hard to say, and it's easy for me to say it possibly, but how you communicate under pressure is critically important because you can catch yourself in a situation where you get a trigger and you're like, respond emotionally, and that one emotional response could potentially cost you your role, or it may cost your credibility or authority. It can do a lot of things. That's why I'm very careful about what I say, especially in teams and communicating with teams, etc. And I just want you all to keep those in mind too. You can communicate with someone in a way where you are still being professional, you still are being direct, but you are not losing your cool. And I know it's hard, especially if it's a trigger. That's why you have to know your triggers first. You have to at least have an idea. Some triggers may catch you off guard, but you have to pick if you are caught off guard by a trigger, you have to just recognize, why do I feel this way really fast, and say, okay, how do I need to respond? And you just respond in the most calm way that you can. Cat 2030 says, have to know your triggers 100%. Absolutely. You definitely have to know your triggers. You have to know your triggers. That is the best way to start navigating some of those high stakes conversations. And I would add this as a mistake when people go into high stakes conversations is that they don't know their triggers. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Cat. Teddy says, okay, don't feed the anger. Yes, exactly. You don't want to feed the anger. So think of it as this. If you were to light a fire outside or burning trash or whatever, if something was on fire, you don't want to put gas on it, right? You want to put water on it. If you put gas on it, gas meaning you getting upset, you getting very emotional, then that fire is just gonna just grow and grow and going bigger until it just consumes all of us. And we don't want that. If you are in a leadership role, whether you're a woman in leadership, man in leadership, you have to be that person that is the firefighter. And I mentioned that at the beginning, you have to be the person that can put the fire out. You're putting water on the fire. You're trying to let's calm the fire down instead of put gas on it and make it even bigger. So yes, you do not want to feed anger, especially when someone becomes very highly emotional and very upset. You have to pay attention to how they're communicating. You observe their verbal, their nonverbal cues, what they're saying, how they're saying it, their tone of voice, their pace. There's a lot of cues that happen that will tell you this person is about to escalate. And you just have to be prepared for what you want to do if you start noticing those particular triggers or particular gestures. Akesia says, after the last high stakes conversation between Trump and Iran, the Iranian negotiators are missing. I guess so. They're doing their own thing right now. Akesia says, Doctor, would you put yourself in a high stakes conversation with Trump? Oh, any given day of the week, I would. I would not have a problem with that at all. Teddy says, thank you. Absolutely, Teddy, you're very welcome. And going to your question, your statement, Akesia, when you're been in those high stakes conversations and situations, it doesn't matter if I was talking to President Trump, president of this country or that country. It doesn't matter. I have to have a certain level of confidence and ability to navigate those situations because I've interacted with political leaders over the years. So those situations don't intimidate me. I'm not afraid because my confidence is way up here. And I mean that in all sincerity. But I do that because I've been developing this for the past 20 years. So I'm sharing with you all, even though we have 1,000 videos, it's a lot. I'm sharing you just a snippet of what I've learned over the years. Now, of course, there's always going to be challenging situations that come up for anybody. No one's perfect. But I will say that I do want you to develop that level of confidence where it doesn't matter who you're speaking with. Thank you for the heart emojis, friends. It doesn't matter who you're speaking with, you still are gonna know how to handle yourself in terms of a conversation. Okay, Akesia says Trump's logic, mine is mine and yours is mine. That's fair play. That's probably about right, Akesia. Akesia says, ha ha. Exactly. Well, I appreciate you all so much. I have a couple topics from Kat, so I'll start developing some topics around those. And Kat, you're always welcome. If you see anything on the channel that you want me to go into more detail about, let me know. But I appreciate you all for being here. I will be live tomorrow morning and live tomorrow evening. For those of you that are new to me, I go live a lot here on YouTube. I typically go live in the morning, in the evenings, except on Wednesdays. I typically go live in the evening. So just know we go live here a lot. I am actually, I'm the only channel here on YouTube that talks about high stakes situations in a way that is in a live setting, that's not highly edited, that's not highly polished, that's not talking about hypotheses and theories and leadership models. I'm sharing with you what happens in the real world, not in some academic book. There are always great information in academic books, but when it comes to having those conversations under pressure, you have to go to actually what actually happens in the conversation or what can happen so you can prepare. So this is one of one channel here. If you like this content, you're always welcome to subscribe to the channel. I have a very massive library here of information for you to learn from. And if you happen to be in my audience of women in leadership, I'm here to support you. If you're a man in leadership or thinking about leadership, you will learn a tremendous amount of insight from this channel specifically. So I appreciate you all. Okay, Kat says, smiley face and laughing. Yes. And Teddy says, keep smiling. Love it. Absolutely, Teddy. Appreciate you being here. Cat 23 says, I appreciate you for being here with us. Absolutely. I am so glad to be here with y'all, Cat. It's always the highlight of my day to be able to spend some time with my audience here on YouTube. So I'm here to support you all. If you watch any of my videos and something comes up for you and you have a question, just put it in the comments below. You're always welcome to reach out to me on DM, at Instagram at Excite Excellence, Dr. Jacinta Lamantai at LinkedIn, and then also at Excite Excellence. I have a Facebook account, but I spend most of my time between YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. But you're always welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. And feel free to share the channel with a friend that you know needs to communicate at a higher level so that they can be able to make that big impact on the world they're trying to do. Defend themselves when they need to, advocate for themselves, and be able to earn more money in their roles. So I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now.